Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard the Wright Flyer. I'm Randy Wright, and I'll be your captain on today's Solo Flight Special edition of our state-of-the-art radio program. Folks, this will be the final boarding call, so if you please, claim your seats, fasten your seatbelts, kick back, relax, and enjoy the show, while I go ahead and delve into the pre-flight checklist, because there really is a lot of news and information to get to before I may fully indulge you with your in-flight entertainment. Well, folks, as you are all aware, during last night's 8th televised Gutless Opposition Party, or GOP, presidential candidate debate on ABC News, one of the questions that Martha, one of the moderators, had posed to Ted Cruz was with respect to a rocket that was on a launching pad in North Korea. And she was trying to do a gotcha question with respect to that, but I think what this points to is a greater problem that we are facing within the United States. For these past 7 years, under which we have suffered through the yoke of the Barack Hussein Obama regime and his claim to be leading from his behind, we have seen that these rogue, tyrannical, despotic, and oppressive elements are attempting to flex their muscles. The reason that they're doing this is they sense a power vacuum left in the wake of a receding tide of American influence, hegemony, and polity. And, of course, this is all in line with what the Fabian socialists have wanted to do with respect to American power and authority in the geopolitical theater. And it all ties into this notion of blame America first. I'm sure you all recall that during the first year of his regime, Barack Hussein Obama went around the world to apologize for American hegemony, or political power, and global influence. You know, the United States of America has been a powerful influence in the geopolitical sphere since the start of the 20th century, and that really started to grow right after World War II. That is when we were seen as a force for good throughout the world. We were pushing for the type of liberty that we enjoy here, that we wanted to establish a new world standard in which liberty and freedom and true equality would be seen as a necessity for any free society. Of course, our arch rival during all of that was the Soviet Union. This Cold War that lasted from before hostilities ceased in World War II until the 1990s, very early 90s, was just a direct result of competing ideologies. The ideologies of statism and the ideologies of a representative Republican form of government based on natural law principles. It would be easy to claim that it was a battle between good and evil. Remember that Ronald Reagan had drawn the ire of many on the radical extreme fringes of the American left when he called the Soviet Union the empire of evil. But stop and think about the various political philosophies that the Soviet Union followed. It was all based on Marxism, all based on a collectivist approach to the world. And when you have a collectivist approach to the world and a true collectivist philosophy, you disregard human value, human worth, human ingenuity, and the creative spirit of the individual. Well, folks, we still see that the remnants of the old Soviet Union are starting to come back together, reforming itself in a sort of Frankenstein's monster of oppressiveness. In the Ukraine, Putin is continuing to flex his muscles because he realizes that the United States of America has become a paper tiger. Under Barack Hussein Obama, our influence is fleeting. It's running away. It's receding. And potentates and dictators are attempting to fill the void left behind. This is why we cannot do as Ron Paul would have us do. We cannot afford to stick our heads in the sand. Liberty, sovereignty, and indeed our very way of life are under threat. Add into this mix the rise of Islamo-fascist terrorist organizations such as the Islamic State or ISIS, and you have the recipe for a perfect storm of disaster, chaos, mayhem, and destruction. And this is all a direct result of the Fabian socialist approach of destroying the United States of America from within. And I hate to say it, but the détente wing of the gutless opposition party has allowed this to occur. They disagreed with Reagan when he called the Soviet Union the empire of evil, just as they now want to say that, look, maybe we can coexist, or maybe we just go into war without a plan. We have got to find a principled approach to address these hotspots in the world. All without bankrupting ourselves, and all without giving up our cherished, fundamental, and unalienable rights. This is the dilemma that any free, open, and honest society, such as the United States of America, faces. Sure, you can achieve near absolute safety if you disregard individual accountability and freedom. We should never destroy the notion of popular sovereignty here in the United States. It is the cornerstone of our great republic, and it is why we were an influential and effective world leader. We have to strive to be that leader again. Because when we fail to take a position of leadership, we find that the world becomes increasingly dangerous. The whirlwind of tyranny and despotism threatens to swallow the entire free world. But isn't that part of the design? Isn't that what Barack Hussein Obama wanted to have happen? You see, he does want us to be like the rest of the world. But he also doesn't want to lose the power that he has. Therefore, in a way, what was said by Donald J. Trump and Marxist Rube EIEIO last night on that debate stage is correct. On the one hand, Obama absolutely does know what he's doing when it comes to the destruction of the United States, as Marxist Rube said. But on the other hand, he is completely incompetent into maintaining the prestige and power that he holds. Of course, in the end, it doesn't matter. Whether he's incompetent or whether he is doing this deliberately, the end result is the same. The United States of America suffers in prestige and credibility, and the world becomes a desperately dangerous place. You know what this all reminds me of, folks? It reminds me of what I studied with respect to the Cold War itself. As an avid student of history, I realized that the old adage that those who fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat the mistakes of the past. Right now, we have, without a doubt, a nuclear North Korea. And it's important to recall that this agreement that exists between the United States, the United Nations, South Korea, and North Korea is not an end to the Korean War that goes back to the early 50s. It was a ceasefire. It's a tense situation. And now that North Korea possesses a nuclear bomb and has launched a supposed satellite into space, it's as though the space race of the 50s and the 60s is begun all anew. Think back to October of 1957. Russia launched the first satellite, Sputnik 1. That was a monumental shift in ideology. It made the weapons race all that much more tense, because the Soviets possessed nuclear technology and the United States of America possessed nuclear technology. The world was made far more dangerous. Then we were pushed into tense situations such as the Cuban Missile Crisis, the rise of the Berlin Wall before that, the Berlin airlift. All of these things were occurring, And it took a strong stance by the leaders of the free world, being the United States of America, to put their foot down and to present a real hurdle and obstacle to the forces of tyranny, despotism, and oppression. Well, we see that those nefarious forces, though heavily battered at the time, are now resurgent. They are pushing to once again gain hegemony, to challenge our fundamental and unalienable rights, to challenge America's dominance in the geopolitical sphere. And the left in this country, particularly under the stewardship of the Barack Hussein Obama regime, has made all this possible. We have a truly incompetent Secretary of State right now in John Kerry. We have a truly incompetent regime running all of these important executive offices, including our great military and armed forces. Everywhere we turn, we see that this sort of feckless Fabian socialist ideology that would rather pay attention to creating a socialist order at home is exposing the United States to ever greater harm. But if only it were just the United States alone, it might be more easily contained. The problem is, this creates a threat for the entire free world. Japan is calling the UK and Russia and China before they're calling the United States. That's because they know right now, under the stewardship of Barack Hussein Obama, the United States will do nothing. This is how much our prestige, power, and influence across the world has absolutely declined as a direct result of the failed policies of the Barack Hussein Obama regime. If we want to make the world safer, we are going to have to go back and embrace the things that made us great in the first place. We must understand that what our founding fathers intended for us was to be the guardians of liberty. They only wanted us to get involved in these foreign affairs when our interests are directly involved. Well, folks, a nuclear Iran and a nuclear North Korea directly involves our interests, because with those types of rogue and tyrannical states possessing weapons of mass destruction, they can move forward to create a holocaust against humanity, the likes of which the world has never seen. All of these fears are directly rooted in the same type of conflict that existed throughout the Cold War. Will ISIS become a bargaining chip in this sort of conflict, as the Mujahideen had during the Soviet-Afghan War of the 1980s? That is yet to be seen. What we do know is that this world is marching closer to a rekindling of the Cold War than it has in decades. And how short-lived the end of the Soviet Union and the terrors of the Cold War wound up being. If we fail to respond to these direct threats to our hegemony and liberty, we will only see these things continue to skyrocket and escalate. And it is all because there has been a power vacuum created as a direct consequence of America's failure to lead. Where is leadership? Where is responsibility? And above all, where is our accountability? It's just not there. All we hear from the State Department, from various governmental agencies and entities, are lame brain excuses. Well, we don't need excuses anymore. We need action. meaningful action, where we are actually preventing these potentates from attempting to thrust the world back into the chaos and anarchy of the Cold War. But that takes political courage. That takes a willingness to accept our sovereignty and to be unafraid to embrace exactly who we are. Yet that is diametrically opposed to the message of the Fabian socialists. These Fabian socialists that were very powerful during the Cold War had suffered a setback during the McCarthy hearings. There can be no question that there were double agents within the ranks of the American government throughout the Cold War. And this is what Zygmunt Dobbs attempted to warn us about all the way back in the 1950s. And somehow, we have rested on our laurels. We were convinced that the collapse of the Soviet Union meant that the day of Marxist ideology had come and gone. But we must not forget that Marxism is a cancerous ideology. It is a disease of a philosophy. And it is recurrent. We are seeing a relapse of these dangerous, extremist left-wing ideologies spreading at home and abroad. And we must be eternally vigilant against these forces of tyranny, oppression, and despotism. Because if we fail to stand up to this, then there will be no hope left. It was that way at the end of the Second World War. It was that way at the end of the Cold War. But we were lulled into a false sense of security. We let our guard down, and it has come back to bite us. Now, we see these nefarious forces gaining in power and influence throughout the world, creating a more dangerous world. Is this really the type of future that we want to hand down to the up-and-coming generations and those generations that have yet to be born? I certainly hope not. I certainly hope that we are working towards a brighter future, but I know that not to be the case under the tutelage of this regime. We need a promising change, a change that embraces the fundamental tenets of our shared Constitution, that would state that the American sovereigns have fundamental and unalienable rights, and that it is our duty and obligation to stand up for, defend, and protect said fundamental and unalienable rights. You see, folks, it's not an easy position to take, but it is an absolutely necessary position to take. Because our way of life, our standard of living, and our sacred honor are all at risk and threat here. Putin is not interested in being a strong ally of the United States. And as our influence falls, our ability to be an economic leader falls. And again, folks, this can all be drawn back to the diabolical, deliberate, and incessant efforts of the Fabian socialists to further divorce the proper scope and application of government from the mandates of our shared Constitution. That is why Jeremy and I have oft-times reiterated on past episodes of the Wright Flyer that it is so important that we go back to strict adherence to those great principles contained within that sacred document. Because when we do, we have the power of justice and righteousness behind us. We can speak from a position of authority, and we can be truly effective in shaping world policy. Now, is this, as the Fabians would point out, some sort of neo-colonialism or imperialism? You know, those weasel terms that they have used in the past to tear down great world powers. Remember, the Fabians had started in Great Britain. Their primary effort of attack against British hegemony throughout the world was to say that it was evil imperialism. They said that they were being racist, that they were not taking in account the concerns, the rights, the liberties, and the human dignity of native populations and aboriginal populations. But folks, do they really care about that deep down in the cockles of their dark and twisted hearts? You know as well as I do. When you look at history, they don't give a lick about these people's plight, pain, or suffering. They use them as pawns to push their agenda. They use them to push for an ideology that is out of touch with humanity and that is diametrically opposed to all that is great, not only with respect to the United States, but with respect to humanity in general. That is the dark and nefarious nature of these Fabian socialists. It is why they must be rebuffed at every available opportunity. They should be chased out of the halls of power, and they should be mercilessly chastised for their destructive, cancerous, and idiotic ideology, because it is working against our freedom. You know why they don't want to really go after a North Korea or Putin's Russia or even Islamofascism? Because each of those groups and those factions are pushing for a collectivist type mentality. Deep down they see them as perhaps misguided, but comrades. They see them as comrades, as allies, as people to relate to, as people who are achieving the same goal, and that goal is the further recess of power and the retardation of American influence throughout the world. But what does that mean? What are they actually attempting to accomplish? Well, they are attempting to accomplish a global socialism. That is what the Soviet Union was trying to do. Communism is just a form of socialism taken to its absolute extreme. It was globalist in nature, and they were looking to tear down the institutions and traditions throughout the world. That is the type of nefarious forces that stand in stark and direct opposition to the vision that our founding fathers had. And it goes against our direct interests. But it's considered not chic to promote American values. We have seen the doctrine of American exceptionalism come under great attack, repeated attack, incessant attack. You know, Barack Hussein Obama's even gone before the cameras of the salivating mainstream media to say that he didn't think that there's anything exceptional about the formation of the United States. Folks, do you realize just how damaging that sort of a statement is? And how that goes against everything that is in the history of this country? But, of course, it goes against it. Socialists always attempt to destroy the traditions and institutions and histories of the societies that they are attempting to infiltrate. It is a necessary part of their creed. They must do it to prevent any and all resistance to their ideology. They do it because they realize that they are incapable of competing in the marketplace of ideas. It's a morally bankrupt system and ideology, and it is an intellectually bankrupt system and ideology. We used to recognize that reality here in the United States. We used to attempt to fight their infiltration. But they adopted the Fabian model. Remember the iconography of the wolf in sheep's clothing? This is where it comes to fruition. This is how they were able to infiltrate a free, liberty-loving, extremely independent society. But, like every other force that has ever stood in stark opposition to the natural law tenets that underpin our shared Constitution and the form of government that was established within our Constitution, they have underestimated the indomitable spirit and will of the American people, and we can overcome it. We can absolutely overcome it. But it means that there must be a rekindling of American self-awareness. You see, folks, this is why the revisionists are doing their utmost to rewrite our history, to change the way that the up-and-coming generations look upon the United States. It makes the up-and-coming generation more malleable, more susceptible to the manipulation of the indoctrination that they're pushing forward. This is why you see large numbers of millennials flocking to a self-avowed socialist. Bring me Sanders. It's because they have been taught that everybody gets a participation trophy, that everybody's of equal importance, and that there cannot be a right way or a wrong way of doing something. You see, folks, this is the nefarious incrementalization that has been adopted and thrust forward by the Fabian socialists. They have taken control of our education system, they have taken control of our information media outlets, and they have taken control of huge swaths of our government, from municipal to county to state, right on up to the federal government itself. But the American people are waking up to this. We look around us and we see that our government's spending money we don't have, kicking the can down the road to ensure that future generations are stifled with the debt of fiscal irresponsibility today. We see that the government is failing to live up to its end of the bargain. And that bargain is our Constitution. That is the social contract between we, the people, the popular sovereigns of this great country, and our federal government. And when the federal government is failing to live up to its end of the bargain, that is when we have a breach of contract. Remember that one of the things that was uttered by Newt Gingrich when the Republicans took control of Congress for the first time in a long time, it was a contract with America. Well, it wasn't a new contract. It was a renewal of the sacred contract and compact that exists between every sovereign American citizen and their government, to restore the faith that people have in the government. Well, once again, folks, faith in government is at an all-time low. That is something that Pat Goodell spoke of back in December of 2015. It is a major, glaring problem that must be addressed if we are ever going to see this country come back to the mantle of freedom and liberty as our founding fathers originally intended it to be. It has not been an easy path to achieve liberty, and it will not be an easy path to reclaim liberty. But it is absolutely a necessary path that we must travel, because we owe it to our founding fathers to ensure that their dream, that their vision is not only handed down to posterity, but that it is strengthened and expanded so that the future generations have a better shot and a better chance at the American dream than their predecessors. That is the promise that we must all keep. Folks, I want to point by example and demonstration of a case that shows exactly the sort of Fabian socialist mentality of which I speak, that very sort that has allowed these nefarious tyrants and despots to vie for power in the geopolitical sphere. It's this type of weakness that we're seeing at home, and the divisive tactics being implemented and employed by the Fabian socialists that have pushed us to these kinds of dangerous situations and scenarios that we're seeing play out throughout the world. This one comes out of my home state of Texas. According to Fox News, a Texas newspaper has announced plans as of yesterday, which was Saturday, February 6th of 2016, to publish the names and addresses of every San Antonio police officer after there was a deadly officer-involved shooting last week. You see, folks, this is the type of nonsense that terroristic organizations such as Black Lives Matters and these other extremist, radical, foaming-at-the-mouth Fabian organizations adopt. We see that Stephanie Zorillo, who is the publisher of the weekly tabloid San Antonio Observer, said that a man named Atrone Scott, or Atrone Scott, had been unjustly murdered. She described Scott as being in a position of surrender when he was shot and killed on February 4th. Irrespective of whether that is the truth or not, it needs to be handled by an investigative process with due process under the law, because police officers are equally entitled to due process under the law as any citizen. That is why it is so important to recall that the United States of America is a nation of laws, not of men. That is what our founding fathers meant. But to show you of the exact mindset that this little fascista Stephanie Zorillo operates under, here is one of her quotes. Like Ku Klux Klansmen with hoods, police officers do everything they can in order to protect their identities for fear of being brought to justice. And she said this during a press conference that her paper held on behalf of the Scott family. Now, what this clearly demonstrates is that the media is no longer being objective. They have further stepped into the realm of Fabian socialism. This is why the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media are so disingenuous and absolutely dangerous. No, the police officers are entitled to the same privacy as you or me or anyone. They do not give up their constitutional rights by putting on the uniform. They are there to protect the order of society. And clearly, this sort of attack, this sort of leaping to judgment when all the facts are not readily apparent, is just beyond belief. And it goes to show that there is this false narrative being pushed forward by the salivating mainstream media in order to tear down law enforcement. Why? Because they want to create a sense of lawlessness, chaos, and anarchy within the United States. It's all part of the Cloward-Priven strategy to overwhelm the systems that exist, to punish those who are trying to uphold the political framework and societal framework of the society that the Fabian socialists are attempting to take over. It is their hopes that the American people, the true popular sovereigns in this country, will come on bended knee to the government and beg for their solution. You see, this is to the poignant point that Carly Fiorina made during, I believe it was the second nationally televised gutless opposition party presidential candidate debate, when she said that actual socialism is the result of government creating problems and then falsely claiming that they hold the only solution to the problems facing the country, when in fact they were the ones that spearheaded the problem, they created the problem, and they attacked those that wanted to enforce the constitutional application of government, the real way to respond to these problems. And she, being Stephanie Zarillo again, said something else that was just horrific, comparing police officers to sex offenders. She said, just as the names and addresses of sex offenders are publicized in order to protect the public from their wicked behavior, we feel that in our community, or rather we feel that our community has the right to the exact same level of protection. The problem is, you are not protecting anyone. You are attacking those who are attempting to protect society at large. Ultimately, it falls to we, the popular sovereigns, to protect ourselves, but the order of society is maintained by our police forces, and no one should be besmirched and belittled for getting up and going to work every day. Law enforcement communities in this country face some of the worst discrimination out of any profession or vocation in America. And it is because these nefarious Trotskyist type communists that dwell within our midst are going out of their way to attack the pillars of society. Remember, this is all part of the Fabian socialist efforts to belittle and denigrate the traditions and institutions of society in order to replace it with their utopian socialist dystopia. That is the stark and dark, as well as twisted, reality that we are facing in the United States of America today. And these people will not rest. Now, it's important to know what the police said, because there should be two sides to this story. The police claim that as Scott exited his white Mercedes-Benz, an officer reportedly told him to show his hands. Scott then quickly turned around, and an officer fired one shot, striking Scott in the chest and killing him. And it was said that the investigation to date has revealed that Scott was not armed and was holding a cell phone when the officer fired his firearm. Well, that's the thing. He made a fast motion. He did not comply with the officer's demands, and when you are in a split-second decision between life and death, you cannot second-judge this. That's why, in the legal sense, this sort of situation is evaluated under an objective test. What would a reasonable police officer under like circumstances do when faced with that situation? I think it's quite clear that a reasonable officer would move to defend his life and to protect the public from these sorts of dangerous activities. After all, this man was wanted for numerous felony warrants. Those are usually armed and dangerous criminal elements within society, and it has been said here that the department had undercover officers following him. In fact, on February 4th, undercover officers had been following Scott, who's 36, and wanted for felony arrest warrants. But, according to Zarillo, that doesn't matter. You see, now it is law enforcement that is viewed as the criminals, and the criminals are somehow viewed as paragons of virtue. This is the type of backwards thinking that the Fabians wish to implement in order to destroy the foundations of society itself, in order also to achieve the sort of twisted point of view they have. We've seen the direct results of a slew of violence being unleashed against law enforcement in this country by the behest of the Black Lives Matters organization and other nefarious graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media, like this Zarrillo creature. Stephanie, you ought to be ashamed of yourself. You have no right to do what you're doing. You have no right to step upon the fundamental and unalienable rights of those who put on the uniform to protect the order of society. Because it's as my first officer, Jeremy Grapington, and I have reiterated on numerous occasions, our rights begin or end where someone else's begins. And what she's trying to say is that her rights are somehow special and go above that of the police. This is the sort of destruction that the Fabian socialists wish to unleash upon decent society. They want to make law enforcement afraid to act. That way they can spread the criminality and criminal elements within society itself, to then force the people to crawl to the government on their knees and prostrate themselves before the almighty state, to have socialism implemented, to solve the anarchy and chaos that is plaguing society at large. This is the type of intellectual disingenuousness that makes the country weaker. And when the country is weaker, both at home and abroad, that is when the power vacuum is created for nefarious little tin-pot dictators to try and fill the void. That is exactly by design. That is what these nefarious elements, operating to destroy the societal fabric of the United States of America, have set as their goal. This is all part of their modus operandi. And we should respond with harsh chastisement and criticism of these illegal efforts. Stephanie Zarrillo should be chastised by the public. She should be held accountable for her wicked demeanor and ways with respect to this. She is not the arbiter of rights. But if she is an American citizen, then she is afforded fundamental and unalienable rights. But what she is pushing for is a form of terrorism. She is inviting violence to be unleashed against police officers. It means that police officers will be afraid to respond to any type of call for fear of being prosecuted or for fear of having their names unleashed or released to the public so that they may be attacked. Because there will be no vetting to see who reads this, and because she's made this announcement to the news, you can guarantee that organized criminal elements, gangs, violent offenders will look at this paper, will grasp this paper, and use it to carry out retribution against officers that arrested them. It means that domestic disputes will be allowed to go forward uncharted. It means that there will be a spread of chaos when officers are afraid to react, as we've seen in Baltimore, as we've seen in Chicago, as we've seen all over this country. You know, think back to the summer of 2015 and that Houston or Harris County Sheriff's deputy who was shot at point-blank range while refueling his squad car. That was a direct result of this sort of twisted machination pushed forth by agent provocateurs of Fabian socialism and these narcissist, terroristic little socialists that are hell-bent on destroying this great representative republic of ours, people like Stephanie Zarillo are actively encouraging the type of violence that occurred, actively encouraging that police officers be shot and killed. And I think she should be held directly accountable for that. Stephanie, mark my words. There will come a day when retribution, through karma, will visit you. And I don't mean that as a threat. That is just the facts of life. Unless you immediately apologize, unless you stop this attempt at trying to harm society. Because society is growing tired of your relentless, incessant efforts to rip this country and our societal fabric apart at the seams. You are a radical element that is there to be an agent provocateur, to be an instigator for violence. That cannot and will not be tolerated in an open, free, and honest society like the United States of America. You see, folks, this is the type of anarchy and chaos that has been fostered under these 7 deplorable years of this Barack Hussein Obama regime. This is the sort of madness that is unleashed upon decent, red-blooded American citizens by the so-called progressives. And when you have the détente wing of the gutless opposition party caving at every given opportunity to this sort of anarchy, chaos, violence, and insanity, it empowers them. Think back to the answer that Ted Cruz gave during last night's debate with respect to negotiating with terrorists. When you negotiate with any of these vile elements, it empowers them. It gives them credibility. It paints a target on every one of us. And what this journalist is doing is not journalism. It is not protected free speech. It is hate speech, and it is destructive. You see, they are the ones that spearheaded hate speech and hate crimes. And they think that it shouldn't apply to them. Well, now that they have opened that proverbial Pandora's box, it should absolutely apply to them equally. That is what is known as equal protection under the law. And let's face it, folks, what she is doing is openly advocating violence, openly inviting death, mayhem, carnage, and destruction to afflict all of society. It is well past time in America that we come together and hold these people accountable, that we stand in stark opposition to them and say, hell no. You will not do this. I think that the district attorney in Behar County should immediately move to receive an injunction to prevent this rag. What was it called again? I get so angry with them that I forget. The San Antonio Observer? He should get an injunction to prevent that from being printed. Why? Because it is not protected free speech. This is a piece designed as a terroristic threat. That's exactly what it is. That is criminal in nature, and the First Amendment does not protect criminality. It protects the right of the people to voice their disagreements with government. That's fine. You can do that when you're not encroaching upon the fundamental and unalienable rights of anyone else. But what she is doing, this so-called publisher, this radical, rabid activist, is inciting violence. She's free to say it, but there are consequences. And I think that each and every San Antonio police officer should absolutely rise up and file a lawsuit against the San Antonio Observer for invasion of privacy. Then let's see how the paper likes what it's attempting to do. You see, folks, this is the type of madness that is unleashed by these Fabian socialists. They want to create divisiveness. They want to divide the American people, pitting citizen against citizen, thereby opening the path for them to plant the seed of socialism, to destroy everything that we hold near and dear about our republic and our society. That is twisted. That is evil. That is evil incarnate, and it is operating within our cities. And when you expound that and expand it to the national and federal levels, that's when you get leading from behind, or leading from Obama's behind. Because it's the same thing. Well, certain people's rights count more than others. That is diametrically opposed to the foundational image that our founding fathers had for this country since its inception over 200 years ago. That is why Jeremy and I have said time and again that those who depart from the Constitution, those who push for this kind of anarchy and chaos, are deliberately doing so to tear away our identity and our culture and our society. That's what this is, folks. This is an unveiled attempt to strike at the heart of the safety of all Americans. It is despicable, deplorable, disgusting, and outright criminal. And when you see it on the global scale, you see that Obama wants to protect these people. Remember what he said? If I had a son, he'd look like, that type of thing. And then to say that it's not America's place to keep peace and stability in the world. That's the type of selective enforcement, the type of selective choosing of what values to promote in this country achieves. He is weakening the country abroad and encouraging violence at home. There should be swift condemnation of Mrs. or Miss Zarelio. She should be taken to task for this madness that she is attempting to unleash upon those who wear the uniform to keep society safe. This is just like Mayor de Blasio spitting in the face of New York officers. This is just like that district attorney in Baltimore going after the officers, claiming that they had created or had acted in a criminal fashion. Folks, there is no proof of it. None. And to attack our law enforcement officers simply for doing their job, to go after officers that weren't even at that scene, that shows you how deplorable these frothing at the mouth Fabian socialists really are. And again, it illustrates how they do not respect individual autonomy or popular sovereignty. You see, folks, this ties into the war that they are waging against our shared Constitution. Again, it further illustrates why it is so important to restore strict adherence to our shared Constitution. Then and only then can we start really exposing these nefarious elements and chastising them as they would have been in generations past. But right now, America is in the midst of an identity crisis, fostered and promoted by these twisted and radical elements hell-bent on destroying everything that is great about this country. They are nothing short of terrorists. Let's face it. They don't respect our heritage. They don't respect our culture. And they damn sure don't respect our identity. And the reason they don't respect any of that is because that is partially in part defined by our shared Constitution, and they are diametrically and wholly opposed to the Constitution. And why? That's simple. It's because they want a system that is contrary to the natural law tenets that underpin our shared Constitution. They want to implement socialism. Folks, these people are not peaceful. These people are not there to disseminate information. They are there to spread chaos, anarchy, and destruction. And this is all by design. It's deliberate. They're not hiding their intent. They're not hiding their wicked and twisted machinations. They are fully embracing it because they feel that as long as Barack Hussein Obama wields the reins of political power in this country, they will be protected. Because the Justice Department will ignore it. Just as the Justice Department ignored all of the scandals like Fast and Furious that resulted in the death of an American Border Patrol agent, just as they ignored the IRS targeting scandal, just as they have ignored the Benghazi issue. Law enforcement in this country has a thankless job, a dangerous job, a deadly job. And just as in any profession, yes, there are bad apples. But the type of carte blanche, blanket smearing and attacking and opening to provocation and danger that this Stephanie Zerillo creature is inviting goes beyond the pale. Because it's attacking all officers. The vast majority of officers are good. The vast majority of officers stand up for our rights. They represent a pillar of society. And the elements like Stephanie Zerillo are out to destroy that, are out to make America dangerous. Why? Because they have a propagandistic goal to tear this country apart, to redefine it in an image that they have in mind. And they don't want to do it through lawful avenues, because they know they can't win in the marketplace of ideas. That's what it is, folks. It comes down to these nefarious elements attacking everything that is great in this country because they loathe and despise this country. Stephanie Zerillo, you are disgusting. You are beneath contempt. And I hope that you are held accountable for this, for proactively going out to put in harm's way those who are working diligently to keep society ordered and safe. How dare you? How dare you? Well, there will be a reckoning, because I know that the decent, red-blooded American citizens are tired of this sort of tirade against our police officers. Law enforcement is not a wicked institution. It's not. But you're painting it that way. You're trying to make it seem as though these are major occurrences that occur all the time. They're rare. And 9 times out of 10, these people whom you are elevating as victims are nothing more than thugs and criminals. but that shows just how far the moral compass in this country has decayed and withered. When now all of a sudden the criminal element is lauded as victims whose rights mean more than those of law enforcement, it shows that the salivating mainstream media, that the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for that salivating mainstream media, are working nonstop to pervert morality, to pervert civil discourse, to pervert civilization itself to meet their twisted propagandistic means. And on the global scale, that empowers people like Kim Jong-un, who put that satellite into orbit. This, folks, is why the 2016 election is so pivotal and crucial, and it is why we must all embrace our fundamental and unalienable rights and a fluent and working knowledge of our shared Constitution. Now, folks, I come to yet another example to point to the nefarious Fabian socialist elements within society that is pushing for this overall weakness that is starting to show within the United States abroad, not just at home. But it's another police-involved case. And what's absolutely horrifying about it is this one comes out of Chicago. And it's showing how I believe that the San Antonio Police Department should be responding to this Zerillo creature. This comes out of the USA Today that was posted a little bit earlier today, which is February 7th, 2016. It says that there is a counterclaim filed by Officer Riamo in Cook County Circuit Court that was filed on Friday, and it offers the first public account of a December 26th domestic disturbance issue in which Riamo had shot and killed a teenage assailant named LeGrier, last name LeGrier, and accidentally killed his 55-year-old neighbor. Now, Officer Riamo was responding to a domestic disturbance call that LeGrier was attacking someone with a baseball bat, and LeGrier's father had told the downstairs neighbor, who was 55 years old, to answer the door and send officers upstairs. At the time she had answered the door, the officer heard someone charging down the steps with a baseball bat. It turned out to be LeGrier. LeGrier swung the bat numerous times at the officer, pushing him outside. And when he got to the bottom step, the officer has testified that he feels that he had no other option but to resort to deadly force. Based on the angle of trajectory here and on LeGrier approaching him, despite numerous orders not to, in fact, numerous orders to drop the bat and to freeze, Officer Riamo pulled his sidearm and fired 9 times. One of the shots penetrated the assailant and struck and killed the 55-year-old neighbor. Now, the officer is bringing a claim for extreme emotional distress, and that the assailant, or the decedent now, had acted in a wanton, criminal fashion. And the reason that he's being forced to do this is the LeGrier family had brought a suit. They had called the officers out, placed the officers at risk, and it was clear that the young man was belligerent and non-responsive to officers' orders to halt. And so, this being Cook County, Rahm Emanuel's territory, Rahm Emanuel being a good friend and confidant of Barack Hussein Obama, and this being Rahm Emanuel's city, because he's the mayor of Chicago now, this was already a heightened situation for officers after the November shooting of a supposedly unarmed black teenager named Quintanillo, Quintanillo Legrier was the one in this case. This was the one in November was the major teen that had caused a lot of problems, and I'm just not seeing his name in this report, but it was the officer Stephen Von Greer or something of that nature had basically shot that person 16 times. There it is. It's Officer Jason Van Dyke had shot a black teen, Laquan McDonald, 16 times. So already we had Rahm Emanuel, pulling a de Blasio in Chicago, turning his back on the police, ordering them to have sensitivity training, and so this officer was already on edge. And Legrier refused to follow orders and comply with the officer, and the officer's life was in danger. And because of the way that the city is acting now, and the way that the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media have been attacking our law enforcement officers throughout this country, he was forced to go the civil route. And that is why I say that in the San Antonio case, the officers should seek civil action to defend themselves against this breach of privacy. You see, folks, this is the type of danger that we face with respect to the Fabian socialists. They are targeting those elements that keep society safe. Just as on the geopolitical level, in foreign relations and in the foreign theater, they are pushing to proactively weaken the position of the United States of America abroad. This is all part of an all-encompassing phenomenon that is absolutely harming the United States of America. And we have to pay close attention to this because these are the nefarious elements that are trying to vie for the office of president on the Democrat side. Under Hillary Clinton, we still hear the same type of divisive balkanization script that has been thrust on us for all the years that Barack Hussein Obama has wielded the reins of political power in this country. And don't think that Noid-Face Bernie Sanders would be any different. They loathe and despise law enforcement, particularly at the local level, because they are not able to control it. This is a stalwart symbol of the old establishment that they wish to destroy. And again, folks, this is why I don't like to call the detente wing of the gutless opposition party the establishment, because it allows these Fabian socialists to engage in their twisted game of semantics, to pervert and bastardize definitions and words, to obfuscate the truth, to basically mold it and shape it to fit their particular agenda. So you see that again, it's creating this power vacuum through fomenting chaos and anarchy in order to attack everything that we hold near and dear about this country. This is why our law enforcement officers are under a concerted and consolidated attack by the radical and extremist fringes of the left. They absolutely loathe and despise what this country is about. Yet, when you look at the federal government and the Department of Justice and also the Department of Homeland Security, they're more worried about constitutionalists and those of us on the right, saying that we pose the greatest and most significant danger to society at large. You see, folks, this is all connected with their twisted, radical agenda that they have been harping and pushing ever since Barack Hussein Obama first seized the reins of political power back in January of 2009. And you see that the Stephanie creature in San Antonio, the one that is pushing to release all of the officers' names, she's reacting that way because the person in it is a minority. And it goes back as a reminder, serving as a reminder for the same ridiculous claims by Black Lives Matters, that they are the only ones that face death by the police. But if you go back to the case in Oregon, where those ranchers were standing off, and that Lavoie person, who was the spokesperson for the entire militia movement there, being shot down, he received similar treatment. But they don't harp on that because he was white. You see, they are the ones that embrace the doctrines of balkanization. They are the ones who absolutely, completely do not believe in equal protection under the law. And it's telling that they tried to attach racial epithets to the land management disputes in our westernmost states. You see, folks, this is the type of division, this is the type of polarization that is affecting the country. They are attempting to divide and conquer the American people. For generations, they have been besmirching, belittling, and attacking our national character, heritage, spirit, and above all, identity. It's all by design. There's no way to escape that fact. It is an integral part of their modus operandi to drive a wedge between the American people in order to fundamentally transform the United States of America. Folks, there is no way around that. That is their goal. Those are their stated objectives. And they are doubling down on their efforts. As they feel the end of the Obama regime approaching, they are going to work tirelessly to move to further strip decent, law-abiding, red-blooded American citizens of their fundamental and unalienable rights. And for what purpose? All to push Fabian socialism. You see, folks, they are frothing at the mouth, just itching for an opportunity to step up the timetable. You see, they're comfortable enough now that they can run a self-avowed socialist in Bernie Sanders to vie for the highest office in the land, at least for the nomination for their candidate. And he posed a significant threat to the candidate who doesn't really feel comfortable enough yet to fully embrace the socialist title. But make no bones about it, folks. You have a socialist and a communist on the left. That's about it. That's what they're pushing for. They are more radical and rabid than ever. And they are going to do whatever they think is necessary to further divide the American people, because that opens the avenue by which they conquer the American people. They are diametrically opposed to the natural law tenets that underpin our shared Constitution and thereby our representative Republican form of government. They do not recognize the rights and sovereignty of the individual. They don't care. They hate that. They loathe and despise that because it is the power of the sovereign individual to stand up to them that they fear most. And why do they fear that? They fear it because they know that their ideology cannot work unless it is done via duress, holding the proverbial gun to the head of the body politique and the real wielders of sovereignty in this country, we the people. Our founding fathers understood that there would be these charlatans and these nefarious elements that would attempt to encroach upon our fundamental and unalienable rights. That's why they included the separations of power. That was a safety valve, part of a system of checks and balances to ensure that no one singular individual or one single entity or branch of government could assume the mantle of absolute power. But when you have the likes of the détente wing of the gutless opposition party, or GOP, that refuses to stand up for the Constitution, refuses to use the powers that are specifically enumerated to them to prevent this sort of nonsense, you see this nonsense spread. Meanwhile, we see that the President of the United States is doubling down on his efforts to weaken the United States abroad. There can be no question that what these Fabian socialists are attempting to do is to dismantle this country. And as my first officer, Jeremy Grapington, and I have warned on past episodes of the Wright Flyer, this is all done for the direct purpose of replacing the United States of America with the United Soviet States of America, a USS of A, to be built in the model and mold of the USSR. So while the Cold War may be over, and the archetype of the Soviet Union may be gone, it is resurgent under Vladimir Putin, who's wanting perhaps to recreate the imperial Russian state. It's still autocracy, it's still despotism, it's still tyranny. We have those twisted elements of the left moving to tear down this country. They are incessant and relentless. And in some way, part of the reason why we're not doing anything that is effectual with respect to North Korea is that they feel some sort of kindred spirit with a little dictator. They long and pine for that type of absolute, unrestricted power. They want to laud that type of power over the true popular sovereigns in this great representative republic of ours. They make no bones about it. And that is why there has been no response to the satellite that was launched into orbit by North Korea this weekend. That is why Barack Hussein Obama has given the Iranians a carte blanche to move full steam ahead with nuclear development. You know, folks, ever since he first assumed the reins of political power back in January of 2009, Barack Hussein Obama has insulted our allies and strengthened our enemies. He has created racial animosity in this country, pushing race relations back damn near 100 years. And he has weakened our fundamental and unalienable rights. You know, it goes back to the response that he had with respect to that terrorist shooting in San Bernardino, California. Instead of pointing to the real threat of Islamofascism, the Fabian socialists once again want to strip and deprive law-abiding citizens of their fundamental and unalienable right to keep and bear firearms for the express purpose of weakening the law-abiding citizens. And what makes it so duplicitous, folks, is that they do it for a claim of safety. But that draws us back to the infinite wisdom, the remarkable foresight that our founding fathers had at the inception of this country. And I'm reminded of a quote from Benjamin Franklin that said, "Those who give up essential liberty for a fleeting sense of security shall have, deserve neither liberty nor security, and shall surely have neither." That right there, folks, speaks volumes about what the radical and extreme fringes of the left are attempting to accomplish here in the United States. They are the ones that are trying to tear this country apart. And why? Because they have a twisted and diabolical agenda. And they will not let anything get in the way of their agenda. It is dangerous what they are pushing, and we should absolutely take a firm stance against it. Again, folks, this just stresses why it is so important for each and every one of us to have a fluent and working knowledge and understanding of our shared United States Constitution and thereby our fundamental and unalienable rights. Because when these nefarious elements operate in the fashion that they have been, working to tear this country apart, they are going against our rights. They are looking to strip us of not only our ability to defend ourselves, but our ability to have self-value and self-worth. These nefarious elements are absolutely against the fundamental and unalienable rights of the citizenry, because they wish to control the citizenry. It goes back to what Alexander de Tocqueville said with respect to socialists, that they wish to micromanage the facets of our daily lives in order to control us. That creates a new age form of feudalism. People like Noidface Blaney Sanders and Hillary Rotten Clinton are absolutely trying to be a new age nobility in the United States of America. But if you go back to the roots of this country, to the foundations of this great representative republic of ours, you'll find that our founding fathers fought against nobility. They fought for a meritocracy. They fought for the type of system that is open, honest, free, and fair. That is the undeniable truth. So when Barack Hussein Obama goes to the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media and attempts to lambast the American people by saying that the United States of America is, by its own DNA, racist, that racism is an inherent part of the DNA of the United States, that is a form of revisionism, folks. That is his attempt to completely disqualify the existing history of the United States in order to push his twisted and radical Fabian socialist agenda. This is what Zygmunt Dobbs warned us about going back to the 1950s. Folks, they have not given up. And it just goes to show that we have to be prepared to fight for a long-term solution, that we cannot expect immediate gratification with this. However, if we support a staunch constitutionalist candidate like Ted Cruz, then we are moving in the right direction. We are taking the necessary and proper steps to galvanize the American people, thereby allowing them to stand up to the malarkey that has been thrust against this country and indeed the popular sovereigns by these twisted, radical Fabian socialists. Look at the undeniable failure of this Barack Hussein Obama regime, and you will see all that you can with respect to what these Fabian socialists are about. They are so comfortable right now that they feel that they can see the light at the end of the tunnel and they think that's victory. Let that light at the end of the tunnel be the beacon of liberty, the beam from the lantern of freedom shining through to purge these disgusting elements from our society, to set this country back onto the course of prosperity by releasing the popular sovereigns from the chains and shackles of bondage to governmental tyranny and oppression. Because if that is what it is, and if we accept our duty and obligation to proactively maintain and safeguard our fundamental and unalienable rights, to ensure that the United States Constitution is no longer attacked by these radical and nefarious elements, then we are at the brink of taking our country back. But it is going to take an exerted effort. It's going to take the armies of freedom who are supporting Ted Cruz, standing together, unifying behind one another, and taking the hits that come. Because the detente wing of the gutless opposition party is just as much invested in this corrupt Fabian socialist system as the Democrats. That's why Speaker of the House Benedict Arnold Paul Ryan gave Obama everything he wanted. It's because he too wants to be enriched by the expansion of the federal government. They will cut their nose to spite their face, to spit at the people they hold with the utmost contempt. But if they go back to the foundational image of this country, to the great dream that our founding fathers conjured up when they conceived this country over 200 years ago, they will see that those very people that they hold with the utmost contempt are the popular sovereigns, the ultimate wielders of sovereignty. And it is our right and our duty and our obligation to do whatever is necessary to preserve and protect our shared Constitution. Now, if that means that we need to have a convention of states, which I think it does, then we will have a convention of states. We will do what is necessary and proper to restore the proper balance of power and the proper relationship between the governments of the several states and the federal government. We will end the autocracy that currently grips our government, and we will see our society flourish again. This is the dream we have. And it is a very real and plausible dream, and we can make it come to fruition if we band together, if we all look to our shared Constitution. Because, let's face it, folks, our sovereignty, our national identity, our history, heritage, character, and spirit are all under dire threat. And that has all been the design of this most divisive regime. You see, I call the Obama regime a regime because they're not an administration. An administration, by its very nature, must rule with the consent of the governed. But there has been no consent since Obama took the reins of power in 2009. There has been no respect of we the people. It has been a tirade and attack against everything that we hold near and dear in this country, time and again, for year after year, election cycle after election cycle. And remember, folks, the detente wing of the gutless opposition party has been the only one that has been pushed up for candidate of president, both with John McCain and Mitt Romney, and I didn't even want to run, so... And they lost. They lost. Every time we put up a feckless member of the detente wing of the gutless opposition party, we lose. We lose on the national stage, and we move that much closer to the twisted machinations of these Fabian socialists who are hell-bent on destroying this great representative Republican form of government. And they do it out of sheer hatred and contempt for the popular sovereigns. They do it because they loathe and despise us. But believe me, folks, the feeling is mutual. These are the people that want to destroy our country. But we have the power to stop them. And the key, the solution to all of the problems that are plaguing the United States of America right now has been with us since the inception of this great grand old republic. It is our shared United States Constitution, that great social contract that exists between every sovereign citizen and the federal government. We can restore the proper balance of power. We can save this country. And let's do it by selecting a leader that will make the avenue that much easier for us to travel, that will open the way for us to do what is necessary to take our country back. Because through that kind of skilled leadership, we will see our country thrive as it was meant to thrive and as it has never thrived before. But that duty and that responsibility and that obligation rests squarely on the shoulders of we the people, the popular sovereigns. That is our duty. No one else can do that. No singular individual can do that. Only we can do that. Now, folks, with that said, it is time for us to begin our descent. I'm going to go ahead and send the flight attendant back for one last round of alcohol. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, I'm your captain, Randy Wright, and I want to take this opportunity to thank you for choosing to fly the Wright Flyer. I also invite you to leave questions, comments, or concerns either here on our YouTube page or on our Facebook page or our Google Plus page, and I also invite you to follow us at Twitter with the hashtag @RadioAviationX. That, once again, folks, is @RadioAviationEX. We hope to see you there, and we hope that you join my first officer, Jeremy Grapington, and yours truly, the next time we take off over the friendly airwaves, leaving you with an indelible yet pure sense of enlightenment as always. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for flying the Wright Flyer. We will see you next time. Do take care.